Alright, so I've got a little video here. Like many people, I had a DC power jack that needed to be replaced on my POD HD500X. There's not a whole lot of videos out there showing you how to do this, and this is not necessarily a video to show you how to do this. This is more of what I did after to stop the problem from happening again. Once I replaced the jack, I had an epiphany that I still continue to plug in and unplug my pod every single time I want to use it, which is usually multiple times a day. Continuing to plug in and unplug is going to result in what? The same thing happening. Eventually the solder connections on the PCB board of the 500 are going to fail again, which is what typically happens to them. Why line 6 failed to put a power button on the pod, I really don't know. I guess it's so that people don't accidentally turn it off when they're gigging. However, you know, if you're stupid enough to hit a power button, then you probably shouldn't be gigging anyway. So what I did was created my own power button. Very simple little thing. I got myself a few parts on Amazon, and I created a power button. To do this, you need a continuity meter and some basic soldering skills, which if you took on replacing the power jack, you can definitely handle making yourself a little power switch. So now all I do is turn on my pod with this little homemade power switch. And I know the lighting in here is not real great, but I'll basically give you a little tutorial here on how to do it and what to do. It's very simple. You need a few basic parts. You need a toggle switch. You need a DC power jack, which in this case, these came in a pack of 5, so I have a couple extras. This is a PCB board DC 2.5 millimeter power jack. I will show you on Amazon too also. The biggest thing here is getting yourself a continuity meter and determining which one of these pins go to center pin or to outer ring. This is very easily done with a continuity meter. Now on the original line 6 power plug, I took my same continuity meter, which also does DC voltage testing, and I determined that this outside ring is my positive leg. The inside was my negative. So what I did, I then determined on my DC power jack which one of these pins, and it's kind of hard to see in the angles, one is long, one is short. The longer pin on this particular jack went to this outside ring. So I know that my outside ring on my power adapter is positive. So I wanted to switch my positive leg. I don't know if you really need to switch positive or negative. I don't think it really makes a difference, to be honest. If you cut one or the other, it's going to kill power to the pod. So what I did was I took my continuity meter, determined the longer pin. I believe it was a longer pin. I have my continuity meter. Let's run through the step for anyone not familiar with how to do this. I take my continuity meter, put it on a continuity setting. If you see here, when I touch these, it makes a little tone showing me I have continuity. And then you probably know how to do this. Some of you may not, but this is what you do. You take and you touch the inner ring or outer ring, whatever, not the center pin, of your jack that you've purchased. And then you figure out which leg you get that tone on. In this case, it is the longer one. There we go. So I now know that this outer ring goes to this longer pin. I then took that longer pin and I soldered a wire from here to one of the legs on the toggle switch. It really doesn't matter which one. Then you take the other one and you solder it to whatever wire goes to the outer ring of the power plug you're going to then use. If you don't have, I had a bunch of wall wart AC adapters laying around. I found one that did fit into this, and I used it. I cut about 8 inches off. If you don't have extra AC wall adapters laying around like I did, simply go on Amazon and get yourself one of these right here. They're pretty cheap. They're only $5. It's a 5-piece DC plug cable power supply male connector. So order yourself some of these, and then take your continuity meter and decide which outer ring goes to which. This must unscrew. I don't particularly have this kind, but this must unscrew, and inside, much like an RCA type plug, you'll have 2 solder points. You need to determine which solder point goes to this outside ring. Then take a wire, connect that to the other leg of your toggle switch. Then take this leg again and attach it to whichever one goes to the outer ring of the plug. You'll then take the other tab, the one that goes to the inner ring, and you'll solder it straight through to the shorter tab on this particular plug. So you're going to make the negative go straight through to this new plug, which will come out of your project box and plug directly into the pod, so it has a connection all the time. And then you're going to switch the leg that's the inner ring through your toggle switch. It's already pretty simple. It's not that complicated as long as you know how to use a meter and have some common sense. So what I then did was I took this little PC board project box. I found a drill bit that fit this thing, and I drilled a hole. I made another little hole to come out with my wire that then plugs into my pod from the adapter cord that I had laying around, and I cut about 8 inches off. And then you do that soldering that I told you. The inner pin of this plug goes directly to the DC jack. Then the outer pin of the DC jack goes to the toggle switch, out of the toggle switch into your outer ring of your adapter. Pretty basic. So anyway, something's going on here with my oh, there we go. So I think I may have something, a loose solder joint in here, because I just had a problem with this not turning on until I wiggled this wire. So I'm going to have to check that. But anyway, it's been working fine. I did it last night. I've used it dozens of times. It's been fine. One thing I did notice, and maybe this is the problem again, when I soldered this switch, these switches are very delicate. You don't want to overheat these when you solder. Luckily these came in packs of 5, or actually the switches came in packs of 4. The DC plugs came in packs of 5. But I overheated this, and the switch was failing. The first couple times I turned it on, I had to actually tap it or wiggle it to get it to turn on. So then I resoldered a second one, and I just did it very quickly. You know, I consider myself a decent solderer. However, you know, I think I overheated the toggle switch a little bit too much. Point being, they're just very delicate. So try to do a good, quick solder. Don't overheat the leg. Just you know, put a little bit of solder on your wire first. Heat your wire up with the soldering iron. Let the solder soak into the wire, and then get a little bead on these quickly, and then hold your wire to it and just quickly heat the two up. Let them join together and get your iron off there. A couple quick tips. Like I said, this is not a video on replacing the DC jack itself, but there are not any real videos out there. The only ones that are out there are for like the USB jack, and they're time-lapse. They're real fast. They don't really show much explanation. But the one guy did explain a few things. On the bottom there's some feet you don't really have to take off. I think it was the 2 center feet. Look for that video. Whatever he said was correct. You didn't have to take off those 2 feet. But then I discovered afterwards this LCD screen is 2 pieces. There's the actual screen itself, which attaches to the PCB board, and then there's also this protective cover which attaches to the chassis, and then that screen actually attaches to the bottom of this with some screws on the inside. There are some screws that basically anchor the screen to this protective cover. When you go to take it apart, don't take these screws for the protective cover off. Leave these in place. Take your knobs off, and then when you take the bottom of the chassis off, undo all the screws on the bottom of the board here, and then you'll pull the whole thing out. You'll have to take out all these little nuts on all your 1/4-inch jacks. You have to undo these screws on your XLR and Variax connectors, the LG or L6 links, I'm sorry. You have to undo this. You'll have to undo the power one. you'll have to undo the pedal nuts. All these little nuts and things on the back you'll have to undo. So then once you get it flipped over, you take the feet off, you take the chassis out apart. And to take the chassis apart, you actually have to undo all the screws, and you have to slide it one way, lift it up a little bit, and then slide it the other way. So it was a little tricky, but it wasn't that bad. So then you leave this screen in place, you take the whole thing out. When you go to put it back in, then you're going to take these bolts off. You're going to then put this on top of the screen and screw that screen in this so it sits firm on the PCB board. It'll make sense when you have it apart and you got it all out. So basically you're going to attach this cover to the board when you put it back in. These little buttons here do actually attach to the screen, the board. So these will have to be in place. The only thing you won't have in place are the knobs. And then you'll put it back in with this connected. So leave this here when you take it out, put it to the board when you put it back in. It makes things a lot easier. That's really all I've got for that. So there's my little homemade toggle switch. Now it stops me from having to plug in and unplug my pod every single time that I want to use it. And hopefully I won't end up running into that problem again. All right, so I hope that's helpful for you. Real quick on the Amazon, here are the toggle switches. These are 2-pin, which is what I used. They're only $5. I think the whole thing cost me 20 bucks. Here are the 2.5 millimeter DC jacks. 2-terminal PCB mount, 2.5 millimeter center pin power jack. And then here is the project box. It's just a Hammond translucent blue plastic project box. 1.58 inch, whatever. And then what I did was I took my switch and I traced it out on the edge. I cut it out with a Dremel very easily. It was a little, it heats up and melts through this stuff pretty fast. So I basically just started my grooves, and then I used a pair of like flush mount flush cutters, very small tip, precise flush tip cutters, and I cut down the edges, and I cut down that, and then I took a file and I very softly filed out the edges to make it smooth and got the depth that I wanted. It's hard to see, but this here box has little lip right here. I then had to I put the lid on the box, and once I had this cut out right here for my switch, I put the lid on the box and I traced along that cutout this little lip, and then I took my file and I had to file down that lip a little bit just to get this switch to fit properly. So as you can see here, well, it's hard to see actually. I should have taken it apart for the video, but whatever. It just maybe like a 1/16 of an inch was actually into the depth of the lid. Other than that, it fit perfect. You can see there, that little bit of overhang on the lid, I had to notch that out on the lid also to fit in there. It all fit in, it worked out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I then just used some Velcro and secured it to the side of my board. Alright, so anyone endeavoring this project, I hope that helps you. Alright, good luck.